I am Julia Bennett, 42, a freelance software developer in San Francisco, California. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I would find myself sitting in a courtroom downtown, facing my husband of 6 years, Ethan Parker, the man trying to seize half of my assets, including the inheritance from my grandmother. The sterile walls and the hum of the air conditioning only amplified my racing thoughts. Today, however, as I gripped the envelope tightly in my hand, I felt a strange mix of fear and determination. I knew I held something that could leave everyone in the courtroom stunned. Across from me, Ethan sat confidently in his tailored Armani suit, his blonde hair slicked back just so, flashing that smug, self-assured grin that always made my blood boil. He leaned back, hands folded, radiating a certainty that he would walk away victorious. But he had no idea what I was about to reveal. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Your Honor, Ethan's lawyer, James Larson, began, his voice calm but deliberate, my client is entitled to half of the marital assets, including the substantial inheritance Ms. Bennett received during the marriage. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, cameras clicked, and reporters scribbled furiously in their notepads, anticipating yet another headline-grabbing multi-million-dollar tech divorce. Yet they had no idea what was about to unfold. Judge Margaret Coleman, a woman in her 60s with piercing eyes that seemed to read every unspoken thought, flipped through the case file with the composed authority of someone who had presided over hundreds of divorces. But I could tell, even from the slight narrowing of her eyes, that she had never encountered a spectacle quite like this. Ethan glanced at me across the room, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, radiating absolute confidence in his impending victory. Rage bubbled inside me, but I maintained a composed exterior, my hands clasping the envelope like a lifeline. I had waited for this moment for too long to let it slip away. As my mind sharpened in focus, memories of the past 7 years flickered through me, each one a reminder of how I had been both blinded and misled. I had met Ethan 7 years ago at a tech conference in Silicon Valley. I was 35, running my own startup, Coastal Code, which specialized in AI applications for small businesses. My days were consumed with coding sprints, investor meetings, and client pitches. Love seemed like a distant luxury, especially in the wake of my grandmother's recent passing, leaving me reeling from loss and grief. And then there was Ethan, a freelance marketing consultant with a magnetic charm that seemed to appear at exactly the right moment. He listened attentively as I spoke about algorithms, market strategies, and my ambitious plans to expand Coastal Code. "You are a genius, Julia," he had said, his voice smooth and earnest. "I've never met anyone as intelligent as you." At the time, I thought his admiration stemmed from my intellect, from the fire that drove me to build something meaningful. He had been everywhere I needed him, attending networking events, offering advice on branding, and cheering every milestone as if my success were his own. Slowly, he became my confidant, my partner, my husband. I didn't notice the subtle manipulations woven between the flattery, the sly comments about my spending, the offhand remarks about how helpful he was to me financially, the quiet nudges towards signing contracts that gave him access to company assets. I had mistaken them for supportive gestures, blinded by the glittering promise of love and companionship. Now, sitting across from him in the courtroom, I could see the patterns clearly. Each word he had spoken, each gesture, had been a calculated step toward this moment, claiming half of everything I had built with my own hands. My hands tightened around the envelope, the paper crinkling under my grip. I was ready. The years of subtle deceit, the nights of second-guessing, the lingering doubts, they all led to this exact instant. Today, Ethan would finally see that the game was over, and the tables were about to turn in a way he could never have anticipated. took me years to truly understand what Ethan had been doing all along. He hadn't loved me for who I was. He had loved the value of what I represented. At the time, it had all felt intoxicating. The lavish dinners in Napa Valley, the spontaneous weekend getaways to Big Sur, the sun-soaked walks along the piers, the whispered promises in the quiet of luxury hotels. Ethan spent freely, almost ostentatiously, insisting, investing in the person you love is always worth it. And I, swept up in the romance and the glamour, never questioned the deeper motives lurking beneath his charm. When he proposed, 9 months into our whirlwind romance, it was aboard a yacht off the coast of Santa Barbara, the sun dipping below the horizon like a painting he had designed just for me. I hesitated. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. Men who come too fast often have agendas, Julia. But Ethan was impossibly sweet. He knelt before me, a diamond ring catching the last light of the sun, and spoke of a future filled with shared dreams and laughter. His eyes glistened with sincerity, or so I thought, and my resolve melted. Before the wedding, my lawyer, Rachel Nguyen, urged me to consider a prenuptial agreement. "A successful woman like you needs to protect herself," she had said, her tone firm but compassionate. I had felt a flicker of embarrassment at even bringing it up, worried Ethan might think I doubted him, that I was cynical or untrusting. But when I broached the topic, he merely laughed, flamboyantly signing the papers without reading a single line. "I'm marrying you for love, not for money," he said, his voice smooth, sweet, and perfectly rehearsed. That prenuptial agreement, carefully drafted by Rachel, safeguarded every asset I had worked for: coastal code, my personal accounts, and every inheritance that might come to me in the future. At the time, it felt almost unnecessary, an awkward shield against a trust one didn't think I lacked. But now, sitting in this courtroom, I could see its value more clearly than ever. Every clause, every stipulation, every small detail Rachel had anticipated, it all mattered now. It was my safeguard against a man who had masqueraded as a loving partner while quietly calculating the worth of my life's work. I could remember the nights I stayed up with Ethan, sharing ideas for Coastal Code's next big AI rollout, discussing investment strategies over vintage wine, laughing until the city lights blurred through the yacht's polished glass windows. I had believed those moments were the foundation of a shared life, of true partnership. But they were merely a backdrop to a carefully choreographed plan. The expensive dinners, the gifts, the weekend trips, they were all part of Ethan's blueprint, his way of ensuring I trusted him completely while he quietly measured every asset, every opportunity. And yet, as painful as it was to realize, I also felt a quiet surge of gratitude for Rachel, for my foresight, for the envelope I now held. Because of her, because of that prenuptial agreement, I was no longer vulnerable. I had the power in my hands, the undeniable proof that Ethan's meticulously constructed world of charm and manipulation could be undone. The love I had given freely had been exploited, yes, but the intelligence and caution I had exercised quietly behind the scenes were about to turn the tables in a way he never anticipated. Now, I was no longer the woman dazzled by diamonds and sunsets. I was Julia Bennett, the creator of Coastal Code, the granddaughter of a wise woman who had prepared me for life's cruelties, and most importantly, a woman who was about to confront a deceitful husband with the quiet, unstoppable force of truth. Everything changed 18 months into our marriage when I received news about the inheritance from my grandmother. She had left me a penthouse in Pacific Heights, a diversified stock portfolio, and $3.5 million in cash. The joy that should have been mine, the quiet pride in being entrusted with such a legacy, was immediately tainted by the way Ethan reacted. $3.5 million, Julia? We're rich, he exclaimed, eyes wide, a grin stretching unnaturally across his face. The moment his lips formed that word, I should have recognized it as the first warning sign. It wasn't about me, about honoring my grandmother's memory, or about supporting my life and my career. It was about what he could claim, what he could possess. Soon after, Ethan quit his job, claiming he wanted to support my career and explore new opportunities. First, I welcomed the idea of a partner fully invested in my endeavors. But it quickly became clear that his definition of support involved extravagant spending with no accountability. A brand new Tesla appeared in the driveway to impress investors, he explained. $50,000 vanished into a failing startup of a friend, and he joined an elite golf club at Pebble Beach, wearing the membership like a badge of entitlement. I began asking questions, cautiously at first, curious about the sudden shift in our finances. Ethan's responses were always calm, always charming, always slightly manipulative. "We're married, Julia. Trust me." And I did, at least I tried to. But the cracks in the facade were widening. One evening, I overheard him boasting to a fellow member at the club. "That inheritance? Totally family money. All hers, but now it's kind of ours, right?" His laughter hit me like a cold splash of water. Casualness of it, the assumption that he could claim what wasn't his, sent a shiver down my spine. I started paying closer attention, quietly observing, quietly documenting. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon the evidence that would shatter my illusions completely. In a hidden folder on his email, an oversight that would prove crucial, I found exchanges between Ethan and his lawyer detailing their plans for our divorce. They discussed strategies to maximize his claim on my assets, analyzing California divorce law to argue for compensation based on his so-called emotional contributions to the marriage. The emails were meticulous, strategic, and cruelly methodical. Every detail was calculated. The timing of filings, the leverage of shared social appearances, the exaggeration of his sacrifices and support, the framing of my grandmother's inheritance as marital property he deserved a part of. My stomach churned as I read each line, the realization sinking in that the man I had once loved, thought I knew, had been orchestrating this plan from the very beginning. The dinners, the weekend trips, the whispered praise, the declarations of devotion, they were all part of a long game. I felt a mix of fury, betrayal, and sorrow. How had I missed the subtle manipulations, the small nudges, the perfectly timed displays of generosity that were nothing more than investments in his ultimate goal? I thought about the nights I had stayed up coding Coastal Code's latest rollout, sharing ideas and dreams, believing we were building a life together. Every laugh, every toast, every "we" he had uttered in those months now rang hollow, coated in deceit. Yet, amid the storm of emotions, a quiet clarity emerged. The envelope I had clutched so tightly in the courtroom, the one containing Rachel's meticulously prepared prenuptial agreement, was more than paper. It was the culmination of foresight, preparation, and unwavering self-respect. Ethan may have calculated, plotted, and schemed, but I had the ultimate safeguard. His plans, no matter how detailed, were about to collide with the truth, and the truth was written, signed, and unassailable. As I sat there, absorbing the enormity of what I had discovered, I realized that my anger was matched by a sense of empowerment. Every moment of manipulation he had attempted, every dollar spent in reckless indulgence, every lie told to friends, investors, and colleagues, it would all unravel. The man who had believed he could outsmart me, who had thought my love and trust were tools to exploit, was about to face the consequences of underestimating the woman he had married. And for the first time, I allowed myself a private, victorious smile. I decided to take action before he could. I reached out to Rachel and filed for divorce, careful to ensure every detail was airtight. Months of planning, observation, and quiet preparation had led to this day. Today, sitting in the courtroom, I felt a calm determination unlike anything I had known before. My hand gripped the envelope containing the prenuptial agreement as if it were a shield and a weapon all at once. The air in the room was thick with anticipation. Cameras clicked, the soft murmurs of the press swirled around me, and Ethan sat across the room, radiating smug confidence, completely unaware that the entire foundation he had built his expectations on was about to crumble. I rose, my posture straight, my voice steady. "Your Honor," I began, meeting Judge Coleman's piercing gaze without flinching, "I believe the court needs to review this document before any decisions regarding the division of assets are made." The envelope passed into the judge's hands, and I saw Ethan's face change, just slightly at first, an almost imperceptible blanch creeping across his features. It was enough to make me feel the surge of quiet satisfaction that comes with knowing you hold the truth and your opponent does not. James Larson, Ethan's lawyer, leapt to his feet in indignation. "Your Honor, we were never made aware of any prenuptial agreement," he exclaimed, voice sharp, echoing slightly against the high ceilings of the courtroom. Judge Coleman, unflinching, raised a hand to calm him, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of impatience and authority. "Sit down, Mr. Larson," she said firmly. She began to carefully unfold and read the document, her demeanor methodical, the kind of precision that comes from decades of experience in divorce courts. I watched Ethan's expression shift from confident amusement to growing unease. His smirk faltered, his posture straightened, and he muttered something under his breath to James, who leaned in to listen. I could catch a few words. "I don't remember signing." His panic, barely contained, was deliciously satisfying. For years, he had relied on charm, arrogance, and the assumption that I would never challenge him. Today, all of that was about to be dismantled in full view of everyone. The document itself was meticulous, 15 pages of precise legal language, outlining every aspect of my assets and their protection. Detailed coastal code, my personal accounts, and every inheritance I had received or could potentially receive. Every clause had been reviewed and cross-checked, anticipating every possible claim Ethan might make. Rachel had even included contingencies for emotional contributions, explicitly stating that no claims on premarital assets could be justified, no matter the length of the marriage. Judge Coleman's eyes scanned each line with the keen scrutiny of someone who had seen every trick, every ruse, every emotional manipulation imaginable. Her lips pursed, and after several long minutes, she looked up. "This is a valid prenuptial agreement signed by both parties prior to marriage and notarized appropriately," she declared. Her tone was firm, leaving no room for ambiguity. "Mr. Parker has no claim to any premarital assets or to any inheritance received by Ms. Bennett." Courtroom went silent for a brief, almost surreal moment. Then Ethan erupted. "What? I didn't sign that," he shouted, his voice bouncing off the walls, shaking slightly with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Judge Coleman banged her gavel sharply, demanding order, her voice booming. "Mr. Parker, maintain order in this courtroom." But he was beyond control, pacing slightly, hands gesturing wildly as though by sheer volume and fury he could somehow undo the legal reality confronting him. His lawyer, James, attempted to intervene, whispering furiously in his ear, but even he seemed momentarily stunned. The meticulous calculations, the elaborate planning, the sense of certainty that Ethan had clung to for years, all of it was unraveling in real time. I remained seated, calm, almost serene. The envelope still rested in my hands, though now it felt heavier, not with paper, but with the weight of vindication and the culmination of years of careful foresight. Every extravagant dinner, every lavish trip, every deceitful compliment he had thrown at me in those early months came rushing back, now stripped of its charm and revealed in stark, ugly truth. The man who had tried to claim my life's work as if it were a shared fortune was helpless before the very contract he had signed without a second thought. I could see the disbelief in his eyes, the frantic attempts to comprehend how something he had so blithely dismissed could wield such power. Press scribbled furiously, capturing every moment, every exclamation, every shift in expression. Ethan's face was pale, his jaw tight, his composure shattered. He opened his mouth, perhaps to speak, to protest, to try to charm his way out, but no words could undo the legal authority of the document sitting firmly in front of Judge Coleman. The judge, her tone measured and unwavering, continued. "The court acknowledges the prenuptial agreement as fully enforceable. All premarital assets and inheritances are legally protected, and no claims from Mr. Parker on these assets will be recognized." I could feel the tension in the room release slightly, like a held breath finally escaping. Ethan slumped slightly into his chair, defeated not by argument, not by rhetoric, but by the reality of a carefully constructed, legally binding truth. He muttered under his breath, a low, almost incredulous tone. "I can't believe this." How? I allowed myself a quiet, victorious smile. Years of patience, observation, and caution had led to this moment. Power that Ethan had assumed he held, built on manipulation, charm, and greed, had crumbled under the weight of foresight and preparation. Today, in this courtroom, I was not merely a wronged spouse. I was a woman who had safeguarded her legacy, defended her life's work, and exposed the truth without needing to raise my voice or act rashly. Judge Coleman closed the file with finality, her gavel striking sharply once more. This matter will proceed with the acknowledgement that Ms. Bennett's premarital assets remain hers in full. The court is adjourned for the moment. As murmurs filled the courtroom, reporters leaning forward for the next soundbite, I remained seated a few moments longer, letting the reality of victory settle over me. Ethan sat across from me, defeated, his arrogance shattered, his plans foiled, and for the first time in years, powerless. When I finally stood and gathered my things, leaving the courtroom with the quiet dignity that had carried me through this ordeal, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, pride, and clarity. The storm had passed, and in its wake I could finally breathe freely, knowing that I had protected everything that mattered and exposed a truth that could not be denied. James Larson, Ethan's lawyer, was frantic, trying desperately to salvage what little credibility remained. "Your Honor, my client was misled when he signed the agreement," he argued, pacing slightly, hands waving, voice rising. "He had no idea of the full implications. Surely, this contract cannot stand under these circumstances." Judge Coleman, seated with the quiet authority of decades in the courtroom, leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice firm and unflinching, "you declined independent legal counsel and chose to sign a legally binding agreement without reviewing it. Are you now asking this court to declare it invalid simply because you did not take it seriously?" A hush fell over the courtroom. The rustle of papers, the scribbles of reporters' pens, even the faint hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade into silence. Ethan's chest rose and fell rapidly with shallow, anxious breaths. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words could form. His arrogance, the shield he had relied upon for years, had vanished. I rose to my feet, holding the envelope tightly, my voice steady but unwavering. "Your Honor," I said, letting each word land clearly in the room, "my inheritance has always been held in separate accounts, never commingled with marital assets. Additionally, I have documented evidence of debts incurred solely by Mr. Parker, $95,000 in credit card charges, the Tesla loan, and Pebble Beach Club membership fees." Judge Coleman's eyes flicked toward the documents, a slight nod acknowledging their relevance. She motioned for them to be handed over. Ethan's protests faltered as Rachel's careful records, meticulously organized, were passed to the bench. Clarity of the evidence was undeniable. Every dollar, every line item linked back to him alone. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, muttering, "This isn't fair, it's not right." His lawyer's attempts to interject only highlighted their desperation. Every objection he raised seemed increasingly hollow, a futile attempt to mask the glaring truth. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised, sensing that they were witnessing the collapse of a man's carefully constructed illusion. Judge Coleman continued, her tone measured, deliberate, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Mr. Parker," she said, "the court acknowledges the separate nature of Ms. Bennett's inheritance and premarital assets. Furthermore, the debts incurred as outlined in these documents are solely your responsibility. You will not be awarded any portion of Ms. Bennett's property or inheritance." The gavel struck sharply, echoing throughout the courtroom. The sound was final, emphatic, a punctuation that signaled the end of Ethan's illusions and the triumph of foresight and preparation. The weight of the decision seemed to crush him. He slumped into his chair, face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. The smug confidence that had carried him through years of manipulation and deceit was gone, replaced by raw, unmasked desperation. Reporters scrambled, cameras clicking, flashes illuminating the room, capturing the moment of his defeat. Courtrooms seemed to vibrate with the tension and release of justice being served, of careful planning overcoming arrogance and entitlement. Every glance, every gesture, every whispered confirmation of the prenuptial agreement's enforceability reinforced the reality. Ethan had lost, and there was no path to recovery. As I gathered my things, standing with the calm certainty of someone who had anticipated every move, Ethan called after me, his voice hoarse and desperate. "Julia, we need to talk." I turned slowly, meeting his gaze directly, my eyes steady, unwavering. For a brief moment, I allowed the memory of our early days together, the lavish trips, the whispered promises, the laughter, flicker in my mind. And then I let it go. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm yet cutting, each word deliberate, "everything ended the day you married me for money, not for love. The prenuptial agreement didn't destroy your plan. Your own greed did." His jaw tightened, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair, the truth of my words settling in like an unrelenting tide. There was no retort, no clever deflection, no charm left to wield. The man who had believed himself untouchable was confronted not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet, undeniable force of preparation and integrity. I walked out of the courtroom with measured steps, the press following, eager for quotes and reactions. Behind me, I could hear the low murmur of astonished witnesses, the scribbles of journalists capturing every detail of Ethan's defeat. But I felt none of the adrenaline of a victory declared by confrontation or spectacle. Instead, there was only the calm satisfaction of justice realized, the culmination of foresight, careful planning, and unshakable self-respect. Outside, the San Francisco sun poured onto the streets, bright and unrelenting, illuminating the city as if acknowledging my triumph. I paused for a moment, inhaling the crisp air, letting the tension of the past months dissolve. The nightmare orchestrated by Ethan had ended. The assets, the inheritance, the legacy of my grandmother, and the work I had poured into Coastal Code, all of it remained intact, protected not by chance but by the meticulous care I had exercised when it mattered most. For the first time in years, I felt an unburdened freedom. Not freedom from love lost, not freedom from betrayal, but freedom from manipulation, greed, and the false illusions of charm. Every calculated move, every investment of patience, had culminated in a moment of undeniable truth. Today, I had not merely defended my assets, I had defended my life, my autonomy, and the integrity of the woman I had always been. Ethan remained inside the courtroom, a shadow of the man he had once believed himself to be. I knew that even if he wanted to salvage his pride, even if he longed for some semblance of control, it was impossible. The truth had been laid bare, the agreement enforced, and the consequences unavoidable. And for me, that was enough. With one last glance at the courtroom, at the man who had sought to undermine my life, I turned toward the exit, stepping into the sunlight and into a future that was finally mine to shape. After the divorce, Ethan's life crumbled in ways he had never anticipated. Within 8 months, he declared bankruptcy, the Tesla was repossessed, and his once respected reputation in San Francisco's tech circles was obliterated as the story of his manipulations spread. He was forced to move back in with his mother in Fresno, working part-time at an electronics store, a far cry from the lifestyle he had once flaunted. Meanwhile, I channeled my inheritance and my focus into something meaningful, establishing the Coastal Empowerment Fund, dedicated to supporting women with legal resources during marriage and divorce. Reflecting on everything, I realized that my grandmother had left me more than money. She had left me lessons that shaped how I approached life, love, and self-protection. First, trust your instincts, even when love feels all-consuming. Red flags are rarely wrong. Second, never underestimate the value of legal safeguards. Prenuptial agreements are not signs of mistrust but of foresight. Third, observe actions more than words. Charm can be a disguise, and consistency reveals true character. Fourth, maintain your independence, financially and emotionally, so no one can weaponize your vulnerabilities. Finally, turn setbacks into purpose, using personal experiences to empower and protect others. Through Coastal Empowerment, I met countless women who shared stories of manipulation, greed, and betrayal. Helping them navigate legal challenges became not just a mission but a tribute to the lessons embedded in my grandmother's wisdom. I had survived deceit, protected my legacy, and transformed pain into impact. If my story resonates with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Every view helps spread awareness about financial and emotional empowerment, and your support ensures that more women can learn from experiences like mine. Protect yourself, trust your intuition, and remember, true love never asks you to sacrifice your future for someone else's greed.